When I was approached by Amazfit to test out their T-Rex 3 watch, I was a little skeptical. I've been a pretty solid member of the iOS ecosystem for a few years now, and now that I've been wearing this thing for about a month, I can say unequivocally, it does literally everything better than the watch I was wearing before. I was really grumpy about my lack of battery life on my watch. This thing lasts 27 days. Did you hear what I just said right there? This watch will last 27 days. It connects to iOS. It connects to Android. It has 25 strength training movements and 8 sports movements. It'll track your pickleball games. It'll track your calories as you are wearing it. It's got so many health-related functions, I can't even go into it on this particular ad. But you guys should definitely check out the T-Rex 3 by Amazfit. That is us.amazfit.com, amazfit.com/402p. You get 15% off of your T-Rex 3 by using the promo code 402p. And that, again, is at us.amazfit.com. It is now my favorite sports watch.
With Lululemon, the real gift happens when they're living in it. When you give them the softest loungewear set, the real gift is this. And this. And this. This holiday, Lululemon makes it easy to give a gift that goes beyond. Open the moment. Shop now at lululemon.com.
Welcome to 4.0 to Pro, the Pickleball podcast that focuses on a single shot, tip, or strategy to improve your pickleball game with every single pocket-sized episode. Our goal is to make you better on the court every time you hear our voices.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of 4.0 to Pro, your pocket-sized pickleball podcast where we teach you a single shot or strategy every single episode. I'm Michael O'Neill here in sunny Long Beach, California, joined by my good bud Mircea Morariu there in Boca Raton, Florida. What's going on, bro?
Relaxing a little bit after many months of traveling, and it feels good to stay home for a little bit. So how about you? How are you doing?
Doing great. Playing again on Friday. I've actually taken the week off to take care of some car stuff, and I'm very excited to get on court with a few 5-0 folks on Friday.
Awesome. Let's try to implement some of the strategies that we've been talking about, and let me know how it goes.
I will indeed. Today, we are going to be talking about the third shot, Mircea, and it is, some would argue, the most important shot in pickleball because it really sets us up for the rest of the point. We're going to talk about what we're trying to accomplish with the third and the 4 different options we have for a third shot, as well as the transition from literally when we started doing this podcast, whatever it was, a year and a half ago, to now, and how the nature and tone of third shots has really radically changed, I think, over the last couple of years.
Absolutely. Obviously, the iconic premier shot in pickleball and probably the most talked about shot in pickleball. So it really sets the tone for the rest of the point, and some people feel it's really where the point starts.
I think one thing to note, something you brought up when we were making some notes on this show, your third doesn't have to be perfect. And I think that's where people really get hung up. They're trying to hit, whether it's a drop or a drive or whatever, they're trying to hit it like an inch above the net and get this absolutely perfect third. But that's not what you see on the pro level, is it?
No, you often see people getting significant margins on thirds, and that's really the key. Bottom line is you really got to make your third. And if you're not making your third, then you have no chance to advance at all in the point. And that's going to just kill your momentum, especially if both you and your partner do it on consecutive points.
So lesson number 1, right out of the gates, is don't miss your third. Give yourself a margin of error, meaning don't try to hit these absolutely perfect 1-inch drops. If you happen to hit a high ball, well, there's things we can do about that. It's better to hit it a foot long than an inch low, as Grandma used to say.
Yeah, exactly. Give the opponents a chance to miss.
All right, so let's go over first and foremost, what are our 4 shots?
Well, we have the most common one used right now, I would say in the pro game, which is the third shot drive. Then after that, we have the third shot drop, which is kind of the classic pickleball shot. And then we have the hybrid, which is the combination drive drop. We also call it a drip. And then you also have the third shot lob.
Third shot lob guys annoy me so much, especially when they're good at it. It is really a pain in the butt. All right. So first and foremost, let's start with we are serving the ball. And a lot of times we can dictate which wing we hit our third from. And I think this is kind of novel for people that may not realize that you can actually control which hand, whether it's forehand or backhand, you take your third from just by how you align yourself in the service box. So if you prefer to get a forehand third, whether it's a drive or a drop or whatever you like to do, well, then align yourself on the left-hand side of the service box. If you're on the right-hand side, align yourself just to the right of the tee. If you're on the left-hand side, align yourself all the way to the left by the baseline. So the chances of when you get that next return, when the other team returns the serve, you're going to probably get a forehand out of the deal. If you don't get the forehand, your teammate's going to get the forehand. There are some pros that prefer a backhand. Matt Wright comes to mind. He really has a lovely third shot backhand. I don't think he hits drives much, but he's got a lovely third shot drop that he prefers from his backhand side. So that's one of the points of discussion that you and your partner can have. You know, very often I'll say, what side do you like to drop from? And I swear, Mircea, almost every single time someone says, well, I'll either say something like, what side are you better at dropping or what side do you prefer? And someone will inevitably say, well, I'm exactly the same on both sides. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're definitely not. And they never are, but everyone thinks they are. In general, I would say that I prefer a forehand for a third. And I will go as far as saying when I'm on the right-hand side, I don't want to hit a backhand third. I will say that to my teammate. So if we get a ball that is very in the middle, I want them to know that I'm going to step out of the way so they can hit that forehand third.
Yeah, and sometimes there's a style difference as well. Like even for myself, I can say that I drive much more with my forehand than I do with my backhand, and I prefer to drop with my backhand. So some people like to do one or the other on either wing. And you're talking about the pre-serve alignment, which is really key. And again, we kind of go back to this running theme of communication. When you talk about it with your partner right before you're about to play, it's really helpful for you guys to know where you're going to cover. You know, whether if I'm on the left, I'll just generally say, hey, I'm going to take a few feet over from the midline and I'm going to take it with my forehand. That way you don't have to hit it backhand if that's how you prefer. So knowing your own strengths and weaknesses and knowing your partner's strengths and weaknesses is really important.
The other thing I see where people get caught is that they'll hit a serve and they'll step a few feet inside the baseline. This happens a lot with tennis players converting to pickleball. Then that return is really deep. It's a foot from the baseline. And you get really stuck because now you've got a ball that you can't hit until it bounces. And you've got to kind of do this weird thing where you back up and then try to hit a third. And that's not going to be a good third. That's going to be a bad third.
Yeah, and this goes back to footwork as well. So this is one of the primary concepts that we need to keep in mind. You really want a stable base. You want to be comfortable hitting your third. So you want to either take a few large steps if you have a really short return, or if someone hits a really deep, hard ball, you might want to back up quickly. But ultimately, you want to maintain some sense of stability and balance, and you want to be either neutral or forward when you're hitting your third. Because if you're falling backward, which goes back to the point that you were saying, when people often make the mistake of jumping a few feet into the court, then they have to go backwards. And the issue is not so much going backwards as that they are leaning backwards when they hit the shot. So it's totally fine for you to scoot a few feet backward, but then reestablish that base, that stability, where you're either neutral or forward when you're hitting the ball.
What are the two main goals when we are hitting a third shot?
Well, first of all, you have to think about what you're trying to get out of the third. And of course, the primary thing you're trying to get out of third is ultimately get to the non-volley zone. So that's your goal. So you're really setting the table for that goal. The other thing is you have to know how you're going to get there. And one of the things you might want to do is set up a easier fifth shot. If you're having trouble getting good drops, like for example, it might be at the very beginning of the game, or it might be very windy, or you have someone that's really tall and has a lot of reach, you might want to say to your partner, hey, let's try both of us staying back. We hit a good third shot drive, and then we get an easier fifth, and then we go up. The goal ultimately, of course, is to get to the non-volley zone, but you might want to think about the third as setting up your fifth.
Yeah, I think that idea of setting up your fifth shot or your seventh, depending on how long it takes, is pretty key to have in mind, because I do see sometimes, Mircea, that someone will hit a third and they just charge to the non-volley zone without really assessing how good that ball is. And one of the main issues that has is if your partner is hitting a third, and let's say you go right to the non-volley zone before you really see what it does, it puts a tremendous amount of pressure on them to hit a perfect shot. Because if their ball is high, you're going to get nailed. And that's not really their fault. Even on the pro level, they probably have a higher percentage than the rest of us, but they're not relying on their third being picture perfect and being able to get to the non-volley zone every single time. What they are relying on is not missing it. So you can count on your partner at least not missing the ball when you do what we spoke about earlier, which is give yourself a little bit of margin, give yourself a foot above the net or whatever, just to get that third in, make them hit the ball. But then, hey, let's agree that if that ball's high, let's keep our eyeballs on it, play a little red light, green light, and work on advancing to the non-volley zone methodically until we get a drop that actually lands in the kitchen and we can really advance on it.
Yeah, if your partner is in a groove and they're dropping that ball perfectly every single time, then obviously you're free to advance. Or if they've got a great drive and you want to shake and bake, and what we mean by that is someone hits a third shot drive, that's the shake, and then someone poaches a high return off a fourth, then that's the bake. So if someone is a groove or there's a short return, then you're free to advance forward. However, if someone hits a really good deep return, especially in this context, then you want to watch what your partner is doing, how they're hitting their third, and if they're comfortable hitting the third and you see them start to advance, then of course you advance with them. Watch what your partner is doing. If they're hitting the third, if they're looking forward, if they're advancing, then you know they've hit a pretty good third. Hopefully they're making that right decision. So you don't just want to walk into the transition zone willy-nilly and make yourself a target for a high third. All right, let's talk about targets. You want to have targets for your third shot, and you want to communicate these with your partner. One of the simplest, easiest strategies and one of the most effective strategies is to target the person that's moving, meaning that the person that is returning and is coming up to the net, or if they're returning and switching. You want to target the feet of that player with either third shot drive, third shot drop, or third shot drip/hybrid. The other thing about targeting is you want to give yourself margin. So you want to, number one, get it over the net. But what I like to do conceptually is I want to target the middle 60 to 70% of the net. So I want to cut out the edges of the net, the very most outside parts of the net, the several feet at the edges right by the net post. I typically don't aim for those because they're the highest part of the net. And then you have the sideline right next to the net post. When you hit in that area, that's really a very high margin for error. You want to really target the middle 60 to 70% of the net and eliminate the sidelines to some extent.
Well, and also you become very susceptible to an Ernie for someone who is really athletic. If you're trying to hit, I would say maybe 3 feet in from the net post, that area you could consider a no-fly zone, maybe 4, depending on how big and long your opponents are. But in general, if you're all the way on the left-hand side of the court and you're trying to drop straight ahead, you're in trouble because A, like you said, the net's higher there, but B, somebody could Ernie that sucker and put you right out of business.
And if you're hitting cross court, you have to remember you're hitting at an angle. Even if I'm on the right side and I'm aiming cross court and I aim for the middle, the ball ends up at the left foot of the person on the right. So it's going into their backhand. It's going exactly where I want it to go. And if I want to hit it there for lefty, say the lefty is on the right side, I'm on the right side, and I want to target the lefty player's backhand, then I still aim a little bit over from the midline, and it still will get there to their backhand because I'm hitting the ball diagonally.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. One of my favorite quotes is, "You are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with." But something that impacted me hugely was listening to a speaker on stage say, "But guess what? You are one of the 5." Our internal dialogue can be really, really critical, and it's very difficult to show gratitude to yourself, even though you're doing great in the world. Sometimes you'd never know it by the internal dialogue we say to ourselves. That's where therapy can help. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/402p today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/402p. You know, guys, between 402p, my regular podcast, my vintage Porsche restoration YouTube channel, playing pickleball, actually restoring the Porsches, I don't have a ton of time, and I don't have a ton of bandwidth to think about dinner. That's where HelloFresh comes in. I get farm-fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to my door. And think about it. The holiday season's just around the corner. We are all looking for ways to spend and stress less. HelloFresh makes mealtime nearly hassle-free with delicious home-delivered, chef-crafted recipes that come together quick and are less expensive than takeout. The other part is I'll buy some lettuce for a recipe of some sort, and I'll use that lettuce like one time, and it sits in my fridge until I throw the lettuce away and buy the new thing of lettuce. HelloFresh allows me to step out of my recipe rut and make fun, flavorful meals without needing to hunt for specialty ingredients. And HelloFresh's pre-portioned ingredients mean less food waste, which means that lettuce is not going to go bad in my refrigerator. You can get 10 free meals at HelloFresh.com/free402p. Applied across 7 boxes, new subscribers only, varies by plan. That's 10 free HelloFresh meals. Just go to HelloFresh.com/free402p. All right, so let's give some tips on each one of the 4 shots. I'll start with drive tips. And, you know, it's very interesting right now because of these new paddles that have come out. You can tell when somebody has very good technique because the ball will start doing things you've never seen in pickleball before. You'll see the dip on the ball. I'm thinking of Jaume Martinez-Vic and Quang Duong. The ball just submarines when they hit it because they're hitting it with almost perfect form. And there's almost this interesting phenomenon where if you hit it too soft, the ball goes out. But if you hit it harder and with more spin, it stays in the court. It's something that I'm not used to with playing some of these kind of Gen 3, Gen 4 paddles. If we can eliminate variable, meaning if we can really start dialing our technique in, and this is something you can do with a ball machine, it's something you can do on a wall. I like to eliminate variable. So trying to eliminate wrist is something that you and I talked about when you were here in California not long ago, is I was getting too wristy with my shots. And I agreed. It was like, very interesting because when I filmed myself, whatever it was, a year and a half ago, hitting drives, I thought, wow, I'm hitting this differently than I thought. I said, well, let me do a zombie shot, meaning my arm feels like it's totally straight. And lo and behold, the ball not only stayed in, but it had more dip. And when I looked at it on video, I was like, oh, I'm not hitting it like Frankenstein. I think I am, but I'm really not. But it's literally something I'm having to think about again. Somewhere I slid into a bad habit of getting a little wristy. So I'm sort of having to unwind that right now. And I definitely notice it, especially when I'm hitting hybrid drives and drives. If I focus on keeping my wrist a little more stable and having a little less elbow and a little more shoulder, then that drive is really staying in and staying a lot spinnier. And I'm trying to hit this kind of 5 to 11. You know, if you came from tennis, you're used to a 6 to 12 spin, but a 5 to 11 spin on a pickleball gives you just a fraction of a second more dwell time. And the shape of the shot is a little more like you're used to from tennis. So it's worth experimenting with that if you guys are working on drives. And then if someone's coming in, I've got a nice drive to hit. I like to try to target the chicken wing. If they're a righty player, I'm kind of aiming for their right hip on this shot because there's not a ton they can do with it. I know that if I try to drive in the middle, kick a field goal, as we like to say sometimes, it's a very dangerous shot because it allows the left side person to get a full extension. And this is assuming they're already sitting at the net. It allows them to get a full extension and hit a really hard volley back at my feet. So I do like to hit across court, kind of towards that right hip of the person coming in. And then finally, I think we all try to hit a pickleball harder than we should. I include myself in that. And this is probably realistically, probably an 80% shot in doubles. In singles, you could make the argument that maybe you can get away with hitting a harder shot because you've got a little more real estate to play with. But I think 80% is probably right around the right number for a good hard drive that is targeted towards the right hip of the person coming in?
Yeah, I would even say 60 to 70%, because I think that, at least I can speak for myself, the biggest mistake that I've made over the years is really hitting those drives too hard. And now I take a significant portion of speed off of them and I try to get them to dip more. But having a target is really key. So targeting someone's backhand, someone's chicken wing, someone's body, whatever is working in terms of getting you up to the kitchen, that's where you want to go. Whatever safe spot that you try to find, that's where you want to go. If you know that when you drive, someone has a weaker backhand volley and they either pop it up or they just block it back and you get an easier fifth, then I will mentally, before I serve or before my partner serves, I'll just think to myself, okay, I'm going to target this spot. And it makes the third shot decision making much easier and it makes the shot generally more effective.
And one thing I forgot that you just reminded me of is your goal. When you're hitting a drive in pickleball, and I want you to really perk up here, tennis players, this goal is not to hit a winner. It's very satisfying when you do. Don't get me wrong. I have been known to play left side. Somebody hits a deep cross-court ball. I take a couple steps back and just lace it down the line. And when I hit that shot, it's a very satisfying shot. But it is also very low percentage. I'm ripping it over the highest part of the net, and I'm 50% as likely to get the ball to go long or a little bit wide as I am to hit the shot that is SportsCenter top 10. So don't do that. To focus on just getting your fifth. That is the whole goal of the drive from the baseline, is to get a shorter fifth.
All right. With drops, you want to primarily focus on your footwork first. Again, you want to maintain that stable base. You want to be neutral or forward, and you want to have a target. So you're also targeting a safe spot where you will hopefully eliminate a significant attack on a fourth ball. So if someone has a weaker backhand or weaker forehand, that's generally where you want to target. You want to get the ball, have a little bit of a loft, and ideally you want to get them to hit from low to high. So you want to have the ball either bounce in the kitchen, that's the ultimate goal, but the bigger goal is really to have them hit from low to high. So if you are getting an arc and having it dip over the net and having it bounce in the kitchen, that's great. But really, an even better goal is really having from the low to high. You also want to consider the dwell times. You want to have that feel of the ball on your paddle. It's not like a drive. You don't want to snap it off. So you want to have a gentle kind of cradle of the ball, if you will, for a split second and have the feeling and be able to direct it where you want it to go. You want to practice that a lot because you want to have the ball hit the sweet spot because it's a delicate shot and you're wanting to get it below the net. So it's really important to have that dwell time in the paddle.
Almost like you're trying to carry it a little bit, right?
Yep, exactly.
Like, I almost think of it like if I was holding the ball at the baseline and I had to throw it underhand to get it to go over the net but drop into the kitchen. That's what I envision when I hit a drop.
That's a good way to look at it. I like that. You're basically trying to hit a very small target, but I don't really want people to think of having a perfect third shot drop. Because like we talked about before, perfection is the enemy of good. And what is your biggest enemy is your net. The net and the sidelines are your biggest enemy. Then your opponent, the strongest shot of your opponents is really the other enemies. You have to know what your own skill set is. If you are most comfortable dropping straight, that's a good place to start. Drop straight. None of what we talk about overrides your most comfortable shot that you are capable of doing. Next, you want to drop to a safe zone, and usually it's to the player's backhand. If you are on the right side, you might want to target the left foot of the person that's coming up on the right, and you want to target their left foot, get it to their backhand. Or if you want to drop straight, you can drop straight ahead to the opposing player on the left side. You might want to drop to their backhand, keeping in mind that you don't want to go too far wide so you can prevent an Ernie, and then you can also avoid the highest part of the net, which is right by the net post. You want to make that a safe shot. And then your friend on the left side, if the person is coming up on the left side, it's a good place to drop to the left side player and their backhands. You want to hit to the shot of the opponent that is the least harmful to you. So you want to recognize what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses and what are the safe zones where you can hit a drop.
I was going to say, Mircea, it sounds like we're saying basically hit it to the left foot of each player, but I actually play against a guy that his backhand volley is so lethal, and he's got a Yola mod paddle. We just say, just keep it away from his backhand at all costs. That is a no-fly zone for this particular game. If you get it to that backhand, it's coming back 300 miles an hour. He just happens to have this amazing technique and can really rip it. So that is a bit of situational awareness. But in general, targeting that left foot sounds like it's a pretty good idea no matter what side you're on.
Yeah, generally speaking, but again, you have to evaluate what's working. So you made the point that you recognize that your opponent has a really good, strong backhand and puts a lot of pressure on you and your partner. So once you recognize that, you try not to give your opponent what they want. And recognizing it is half the battle, and then hitting it to the other spot is the other half the battle.
This next shot is really the belle of the ball of the last year or so, and that is the hybrid drive drop, or the drip, as you like to call it.
Yes, sir.
We call it the new school third. It is a 40% shot that is meant to really dip and is targeted towards the feet of the returner, the person who has just returned the ball. Let's say they've hit a somewhat hard return, much to their own detriment, because it doesn't give them a lot of time to get to the non-volley zone. And we have a chance now to hit a ball that they have to fish from their ankles in the middle of the transition zone. That is a fabulous shot. It is my favorite shot. And to me, when that particular shot is humming, it is very difficult to beat, especially if somebody doesn't make some adjustments on the other side, i.e. giving themselves a slightly higher return to give themselves some time to get to the non-volley zone. If they keep doing what they're doing, I'm going to keep taking advantage of them by hitting this hybrid drive.
Yeah, and it gives your partner a good opportunity to poach. And one thing to remember is that this is really set up well by a really good deep serve, either a high serve or a drive serve or a looping topspin serve that lands deep and really sets you up for this type of shot, because you're keeping your opponents back, and that way gives you more room between the net and their feet as they're coming up.
Have you ever been, the fourth shot we alluded to before is the lob. Have you ever been a third shot lobber? Because I have not.
Yeah, I generally haven't, except with some few specific contexts. Number one, when you're against the wind, that's when I really consider the third shot lob. And number two, when people are unwinding the stack or switching, that's another time I really consider it, especially in mixed doubles when the guy is on the right and the lady is on the left and you're serving to the guy and they are switching. So the guy is running over to the left side. I find a really good topspin lob over the lady is effective, especially against the wind.
If somebody can execute a great rolling lob that's kind of just above your paddle, man, it can be frustrating. I mean, just to watch the thing just roll by you, it's such a bummer. I always thought, by the way, and this is a different show altogether, that a third shot lob in singles, especially when someone blatantly charges the net on the return, could be great. But I have never had the cojones to actually execute that in the middle of a real tournament game.
Yeah, generally speaking, in pro singles, that's a really, really tough ask. And it's not something I generally recommend, except for maybe a very specific circumstance when you know that someone does not have a very good overhead.
Well, we love to wrap the show with a couple of pro tips from you, Mircea. So what can you give us for thirds?
The first one is make your third. Don't try to be perfect. I've made the mistake a million times, and that was probably the biggest mistake that I made. I kept trying to hit perfect thirds, and you don't have to. You have to just try to get it over the net, number one, and number two, get someone hit from low to high. So really make your thirds. And I know that seems really intuitive, but it will help your game tremendously when you're not missing them. Number two is focus on your footwork. When you are in the correct position, you have a stable base, the ball will generally go where you want it to go. That's what you want to feel. You want to feel comfortable and that the ball is just heading in the right direction where you want it to go.
Well, that is the show. Arguably the most important shot in pickleball, as it sets up the rest of the point. These are points that you can actually score because you are serving, and it helps you get to the non-volley zone, which, as we know, is the way you win points in pickleball. So take these things to the court, you guys, and please let us know. Write myself at 4.0 to Pro on Instagram or at BrainsDoc on Instagram. Let us know how your thirds are, and we would love to get a little bit of feedback from you guys. So for Mircea, I'm Michael. You guys keep on rocking. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to 4.0 to Pro. For more tips, find us on Instagram at 4.0 to Pro. If you have a pickleball question, submit it at picklehelp.com. Now, get out there and dominate. But don't forget to have fun.